It's the holiday season in Duckburg, and money is in short supply. Donald only has $5 to scrape together for Christmas presents, but nobody has it worse than the kids of Shacktown, the place where people in Duckburg live who are down on their luck. In a burst of Christmas spirit, the Ducks decide to throw a Christmas party for Shacktown with turkeys and a toy train. But to raise the money for the party, they'll need $25 from Uncle Scrooge. It'll take a miracle to get him to part with it. In this story, Carl Barks channels Charles Dickens and creates A Christmas for Shacktown, one of the best comics in his bibliography. Today on Truth, Beauty, Comics.
Welcome to Truth, Beauty, Comics. I'm Levi, a cartoonist.
And I'm Felix, a guy who likes comics.
And this is the podcast where we look for transcendence in a pulpy medium. Today we'll be talking about A Christmas for Shacktown by Carl Barks. And Felix, I believe this was your first time reading this comic. Am I right about that?
It was. I've read a lot of Barks, and I know that this is an iconic one, but I'd never read it before, and so it was very fun. I think Barks. I mean, we sort of extolled Barks with 3 episodes already talking about his Scrooge comics, but I think one thing that he's great at is the Christmas story. Like, I think his Christmas stories tend to be really well structured and very satisfying and funny and sort of heartwarming. So I really enjoyed this. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, this was in a collection. Was in a collection. It was the first collection I ever encountered of Carl Barks's comics before I even knew who he was as a kid.
Okay, so you've read this a million times.
Yeah, I've read this since I was little. It was in our public library. It's in the big white Carl Barks collection, kind of a best of, I guess you could say. And it's that collection itself is fantastic. It has pretty much there's not a stinker in the bunch on that one. But this one even stood out among those. It's always it's kind of it feels I know we called it Dickensian, which I think is appropriate. It feels like Uncle Scrooge in this story is very close to Ebenezer Scrooge, kind of his namesake. But even more so, it almost feels like a Frank Capra kind of a story in that, It's a Wonderful Life kind of period of where, the characters take on a little bit more, especially Donald and his nephews. There's a little less hijinks from them. They are kind of especially Donald is kind of almost a Jimmy Stewart-esque character, you could say here. So there's a depth to this story, and it's not a fantastic adventure. There's not, with maybe a few exceptions, there's not a ton of action in this comic, but to me, it's just one of his best stories, and just very well composed, very well put together. And it stands above a great many other good Christmas stories, but this one's always been my favorite.
It's striking to me. I've kind of recently reflected on how Christmas is this sort of time of feel good. I mean, it's many things, but I think in the popular culture, it's sort of a time of warmth and coming together and things of that sort. But it's striking how Christmas in stories, film, comics, novels, short stories, very often is tied up with a lot of very painful things, death, loss, temptation to suicide, and especially poverty. And this, I think, right, I mean, you mentioned It's a Wonderful Life. We mentioned A Christmas Carol. Even, right, Peanuts Christmas Special, there is this sort of, the tiny little tree, the sort of impoverished, so to speak, children's tree. And this story is another example of that, where there is this kind of, confrontation of, like, I mean, a few of the opening pages are frankly pretty bleak, depicting Shacktown, and and it has, spoiler alert, a happy ending. They get their train, they get more than their train, they get their turkeys. I mean, it's very sort of feel good, but there is this sort of there's just this awareness that wealth and even health are not evenly distributed in this world in anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's why this one has always stood out to me, because I think um, a well that Barks will really almost always go back to for his Christmas stories, which he did 27 Christmas stories over his career. I mean, that's a lot, and some of them are really really good. But kind of just a recurring theme is the typical setup is Donald doesn't have money for presents, or the kids want some really outlandish, expensive present, and
Uh-huh.
hijinks ensue to get it. This is like probably my second favorite Christmas story by Carl Barks is A Letter to Santa, which is some of the best drawings that I think Carl Barks has ever done. I mean, it is I don't know if you've ever read A Letter to Santa, but
I
that one
haven't.
is
Which
worth picking up.
Fantagraphics volume is it in? Do you know?
I don't know. I have it in an old, just random comic collection that it's reprinted in. Like it's like the
Yeah.
best American comics or something. And you can find this usually in used bookstores. It's pretty common, but yeah, that's where I read it, and it came out a couple years before Christmas for Shacktown, so Uncle Scrooge is kind of still in his villainous mode, but
Yeah.
it is just a like the illustrations are so good, the comedy in it is so good. It's like him firing on all cylinders, but really the plot is how do we get the three nephews the presents they want, which is fun, and it has like hilarious hijinks kind of ensue, but it's not it's not as kind of it doesn't have any somber more a deeper side to it that A Christmas for Shacktown does. And I think that's why this one, other than just being a great story, just kind of stands out to me. It is a little more serious. It's a little more dealing with that kind of melancholy side of Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it does so well. I mean, let's get into the story a little bit before
All
we
right, yeah.
have much more. Yeah, because there's uh yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to it. Yeah, that opening spread I think is really striking. Where you just have the three Duck nephews walking through Shacktown, and it's bleak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think um, of a comic that Barks opens in this way. I don't know if he ever does. Not even opens with, but um, does it ever get that bleak in any of his other comics that you can think of? I'm trying to.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
kind of
I've
racking
read
my brain.
probably a dozen volumes of the Fantagraphics, which are 200 pages a piece, and I you know I don't think I've encountered um, anything this sort of depressing. Right? You have just all the kids dressed sort of as bums, basically. You see room for rent sign. All the houses seem like they're dented and damaged, and uh, paint is peeling. Uh, and you see this this little kid who's sadly making a game of bunch of old tin cans. It's Yeah, you see some of the kids working. One kid is making a snowman, but she looks sort of depressed as she does it. Yeah, I can't think of anything like it.
Yeah, it's yeah, and it's elevated by um, I'm always impressed by just how good of an artist, subtly good of an artist Barks is, but he really gives this scene a lot of depth. He's there's the way he arranges kind of the characters on the page here. Where we have this kid playing with cans in the foreground, right, and then you just kind of see this layout, but the expressions on the expressions on the nephews' faces aren't like melodramatic, but they're they're really emote very well. You can kind of see the guilt they're feeling as they walk through Shacktown. So it's everything works really well here. I mean, as far as the story goes, for those of you not familiar with it, I mean, it begins with the nephew's walking through Shacktown as we've been describing him. And if you're seeing the video, maybe you're following along as well. Um, but they're getting more and more depressed, feeling like as they see the living conditions, they wish they hadn't taken this shortcut through Shacktown. And they're like, we're like fat pigs, basically, is kind of how they feel. And they wish they could
Yeah.
help in some way, like these kids who are just have it way worse than they do. As the story kind of goes, if we want to just keep going through the plot here, they have this idea. They run into Daisy Duck, and and she's saying, what's wrong? Christmas should be fun. Should be all smiles. Christmas is coming. And they just can't get in the spirit because they know that Christmas is not coming for the kids of Shacktown, basically. And Daisy has this brainstorm to that maybe there's something we can do, that her club, her ladies club. I'm not sure. Is it a sewing club or something like that? I'm not exactly
Oh, I
sure.
thought it was like a ladies' auxiliary.
Yes.
Let me
Okay.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the ladies' auxiliary. Yeah, because right, America used to be replete with these sort of voluntary associations that, I mean, both men's and women's. Right, you think of Knights of Columbus, Lions, Rotary, VA, slightly more unsavory in various ways, but Masons. And you'd have on the women's side, right, the ladies' auxiliary, the altar rosary, all these sorts of things. Where there's just this sort of public spiritedness, and
Mm-hmm.
in the last 50 or so years they've sort of fallen on hard times. So I'm always I'm in a couple, and I'm always encouraging people to join them. So this comic is a good advertisement for some of the good that they can do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This came out. I mean, it should be noted, in 1952. So this was probably before the
In the
decline
heyday.
of such institutions in our society. Yeah. Um, yeah. So they're they have this idea of raising money, but as we see, this is going to be a little bit harder than it looks. Donald, and this is one of the things, we cut to Donald in the story, and this is one of the things that I think, I've kind of the sides of Donald that I've always appreciated in the Carl Barks stories, is he's much more a there's certain modes that Donald will get into. Sometimes he gets a like there's almost certain characters he'll play. Like many of the stories that Carl Barks will do have to do with Donald getting some sort of talent or excelling at something, and then being like, his downfall is his hubris, right? Um, and
Yeah.
he becomes proud, and then it all backfires in the end. Or he's just driven by like petty competition, often, way more than, like, you think of the stuff with Gladstone Gander, where all he wants is just to be like better than Gladstone. So he's an interesting character. He has different
Yeah.
modes he gets into, but this is like the Donald everyman mode. Like I said, he could almost be played by like a Jimmy Stewart or something, where he's just like a normal guy
Yeah.
who doesn't have enough money, but he's trying to like raise like his three nephews. And I've always kind of liked, I mean, Donald in all his incarnations is really enjoyable. But this one I like when he's in this mode. He seems kind of a richer character here. But
Yeah, I
we
think
cut to
there's more
Donald.
potential for
Yeah.
kind of poignant storytelling in a way that some of the others, I mean, they're fun, there are great stories there, but they don't have, as I said, sort of the poignancy that is possible with, I think, this iteration of Donald.
Yep. Yeah. And so as we see, he's short on money. He only has $5 to his name. And then Daisy comes and says, we need to raise $50 for the children of Shacktown. They all decide to pool their money. The kids are going to they ask to donate the money that Donald was going to spend on their presents, the $5. They're going to they're going to donate the money they were going to spend on Uncle Donald's present. And they basically decide, well, we need $25 from somewhere. We need to ask Uncle Scrooge. He has all the money in the world, basically. Any thoughts on this story so far?
I mean, it's a great setup. I think Barks we've commented before on how good Barks is at just kind of establishing the characters very quickly. Because there's that idea, Stan Lee always used to say, when you're writing a comic, to be aware that this could be someone's first comic book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so this, I think, brings you in. You get a sense of who Donald is, what he's like, who the nephews are, what the conflict is. Yeah, it's just very efficient storytelling. And then a few pages in, we're on to the iconic character of Scrooge, who again is really quickly characterized first by Donald sort of indicating what an old miser he is, and then seeing Scrooge himself trying to shovel all his money to keep it from coming out of the door, in a really just sort of great Barksian image of Scrooge. Yeah, I think it's really effective, really good.
Yeah, you want to go ahead with continuing the recap here?
Sure. So at this point, as I said, sort of Scrooge enters the story. Uh, Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong part. Sorry. So Scrooge refuses his nephew's request for donation, but after a bit of finagling, Donald is able to get Scrooge to agree to match Donald if Donald can get $25, because Scrooge realizes that 25 of it is for a toy train. And he says, this is just completely useless. Why would you ever want a toy train? This is totally ridiculous. I get that they need food. So if you can get the money for the train, then sure, I'll pay the $25 for the turkey, for the food. So the nephews, Daisy and Donald, pool their efforts to raising the $25. Donald's, so they each have to sort of raise $5. They each think that they can. And we follow Donald in his efforts. So first, he tries to tries to elicit charity just by walking up to people and asking, and there's no luck. There's other people trying to raise money. There's people with a bajillion kids who are trying to get their own kids fed and in presents. So he ends up sort of trying to trick Uncle Scrooge, and that doesn't work. He brings a rat to Uncle Scrooge's. Uncle Scrooge, as has been established in previous stories, has this deathly fear of rats. He's worried that rats will come and eat his money. So Donald brings a rat in, lets it in the office. Of course, the rat makes right for the money. Donald says, hey, for $5, I'll catch it. He catches the rat, but he puts it in his pocket with the $5. The rat eats the $5 and he's no better. So how do you like this sort of back and forth as we follow Donald trying to get money? Oh, there's the one more bit I should mention too, is the begging bit. He'd been sort of going out to people and asking, but at one point he just gets so angry that he throws his hat on the ground and sits on the bench. And then after a minute, someone tosses a little money into his hat on the ground, thinking that he's begging. He says, hey, this is the way to do it. And soon Scrooge realizes that he's making money from it, and Scrooge starts begging there to get money himself, which might be my favorite joke in the
Yeah.
whole comic. But yeah, so how did you enjoy this sort of series of attempts?
Yeah, no, I think this is a lot of fun, and it's not all a doom and gloom, situation, right? Not to get that impression. These are hilarious. It does raise a few interesting word is, but not philosophical, but um, there is some odd implications in this story that did strike me. They own a rat.
Yeah, I know, the pet
Presumably
rat.
this is in the same universe as Mickey Mouse, so it's kind of the Pluto. Mickey owns a dog, and
Yeah,
later they will eat turkeys, these ducks. So there's without any weirdness to that. So
yeah,
really, the ducks in this universe are just are just people, with normal animals around them. But overall, one of the things I love about this sequence is the art. I think just Barks is doing some really interesting stuff with panel borders here, and he does this sometimes, but really a lot in this one, where there's he'll do these interesting constructions, non just square borders to his panels, and it's almost stuff you'd see in manga, later,
Yeah,
like here. So he's being very creative, and just there's some foreshadowing in this sequence. Like the whole time, Uncle Scrooge is just trying to shove his money bin, just pack it to the brim with money, and having kind of a hard time of it. And I love one of the things about Bark's art is it's like never stiff. Like the characters are so lively in their poses here, and there's so many examples of this where Uncle Scrooge is like pushing with all his might to get this money in. When they're like fighting each other, when they're having this confrontation, they're like Donald is shoving Uncle Scrooge away with his foot. There's so much like subtle little action and acting that goes on here. Even like
yeah,
a couple pages here, just like the pose where Donald is dejected. He says rats, and this pose here that he has where he's just so dejected, he throws down his hat, and that there's so much action in that. And then finally, the look of accusation that Uncle Scrooge gives him, where there's just this pride, his shoulders are thrown back, Um, I just there's every panel you could look at. And I think this is one of the things that makes his comics so fun to read. Is there's the characters are just so full of life, and there's never like a stiffness to it that I just hate in art. Everything just moves and just like is just like vibrant.
yeah. Right. Barks had before moving to comic books a background in animation, and I think that's visible throughout his career. I mean, I think he I wrote a review of the first volume of the Fantagraphics edition of Karl Barks's comics, and I think his earliest work feels in a kind of negative way, sort of like like a storyboard. But very quickly he sort of got the comics medium, I think, but took a sense of motion with him from animation. Uh, he's just so good at, I mean, particularly Donald and Scrooge, drawing them in these sort of moments. Right? I mean, it's not like an action comic, right? They're not battling with swords most of the time, but just sort of Donald sort of shocked, going ah, just
Yeah.
looks. I don't know. It's very effective in terms of storytelling. You know exactly what he's thinking and feeling, but it also a lot of the time is very funny. He's just
Mm-hmm.
he has that sort of mastery of uh yeah, of kind of positions and movements of the
Yeah.
human, or I suppose the duck body.
Yeah. And you really see it when you look at other duck artists at this time. I think he had a real big impact on subsequent artists who kind of came in afterwards. Like
Yeah,
he raised the game so much that it doesn't jump out to me as much in modern comics, but I still don't think anyone, even guys like Don Rosa, who I love, ever could draw. Like I've never read anyone who draws these characters so well, and just makes captures these expressions with so much subtlety, and but it's just pleasant to read. I don't know.
yeah,
There's a real
absolutely.
magic to it.
Yeah. So only when I'll continue. Only when he swallows his pride and asks this ridiculous character, Gladstone Gander, who is Donald's cousin, does Donald finally succeed in raising his share? And there's this sort of ridiculous series of events with Gladstone. I'm always really amused by Gladstone. So then, feeling cheeky, Donald donates this this like hot dime that had been dropped in that was part of the story to Uncle Scrooge, who's still begging in the park. Donald returns home to gather with the nephews and Daisy to collect the full $25 from Uncle Scrooge. In the meantime, Uncle Scrooge has returned to his money bin and dropped the dime Donald donated through the roof. This causes a catastrophe. The whole
To say
money
the
bin
least.
collapses. Donald arrives to find a shocked Scrooge, telling him that it's too late to get any money. Donald opens the vault door and sees that the floor has collapsed and there's just these caverns below Duckburg that the money is lost in. Scrooge gets experts in. They confirm that the money is irretrievable. The slightest jiggling that would, of course, be made by any machinery to get the money would cause it to collapse further into a seemingly bottomless quicksand. Very,
Right.
very realistic plot here, but whatever. So now Donald is still $25 short and has to take care of a shocked and depressed uncle. I just think this is, I mean, this is very, very contrived, but I don't care. This is just
Right.
such a fun series of events and setup. And I do think this is one of the things that the Duck comics are so good at is Barks's particularly, but Rose's too, and a few others I've read. Just putting the Ducks into situations that are funny, completely ridiculous, but very fun to read about, and even sometimes kind of dramatic and exciting. Yes,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any kind of thoughts on this section.
Well, I do think one of the things that one of the reasons I like this story so much is this is kind of the like a third act twist almost, but if you're familiar with Karl Barks, this is not like a twist that, you know, so many of the stories end up have this kind of, you know, I think about where they go to Atlantis or something like that, you know. They start off with one thing and they have this kind of like halfway through the plot totally changes to something else. Um, this one to me, and usually it's with them trying to save Uncle Scrooge's money, right? And this is so this in some sense is a very typical story. How are the nephews going to save Uncle Scrooge's money, his fortune, right? It's vanished. He has to get it back. I mean, how many times have we seen Uncle Scrooge reduced to being penniless and in tears, you know? Um, but this is really not the plot overall goal of this story. It's to help the kids of Shacktown. So I think this makes it an even more interesting kind of motivation to save his money, because they want to give these poor kids a Christmas. And, you know, Uncle Scrooge was the only way that they were going to be able to do that. And now he's broke and can't follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is one of the, it's a plot device that Barks uses often, but it's a little more poignant this time around than just getting him back his money.
Yeah. All right, you want to take us home and summarize the tail end?
Sure. Yeah. So Uncle Scrooge has moved into them. I think this the sequence I just got to call out where he says, "Is that my third dish of oatmeal, nephew, or my fourth? I can't see the table for my tears." And just Donald's expression. He's eating all their food, but he's weeping into the oatmeal at the same time. You know, just not who you want to have move in with you, basically. But the nephews have a brainstorm. Huey, Louie, and Dewey, when they were out exploring with the Junior Woodchucks, they saw a cave that led beneath Duckburg, basically. So they want to go check out this cave to see if maybe there's a way to the money. They all go and explore, and it seems to be leading them right to Uncle Scrooge's money, but they hit a dead end, and the only opening that actually leads to the money is something basically a badger hole, too small to crawl through. They can't excavate, otherwise the cave will collapse. So you know they're kind of stuck in the same position as before. But the nephews say, you know what, we're gonna put this problem up to the Junior Woodchucks, because the Junior Woodchucks can solve anything. And you know, lo and behold, hours later, you know, Uncle Scrooge and Donald are sitting in this cave, just kind of waiting for the nephews to return. And Uncle Scrooge is weeping. But he says if he can just smell his money, he'll be happy as a lark. He says this through his tears. Clearly, he's not going to be happy as a lark just by smelling his money, but this is the only happiness he thinks is available to him because it's all gone.
Yeah.
But the nephews return with a toy train. Um, and they have contrived a way to send the train in through this badger hole to pick up the money and retrieve it. It's small enough; it doesn't jiggle, doesn't make any noise. They send it through at low speed, and lo and behold, it seems to be working. And Uncle Scrooge is overjoyed. And he says, boys, you've earned my everlasting gratitude. But Donald says, oh, come on, how about a cash reward? That's not going to help us. And Uncle Scrooge agrees for once. He says, you're right. I'll give you the boys the first cartload of money that comes out of the hole. And then the train appears with this money. And the first cartload is a sheaf of bills, $100,000 in total, which causes Uncle Scrooge to faint dead away.
I love that.
Yeah. He had a moment of weakness, and it really backfired on him. So, needless to say, that the kids at Shacktown don't just have one toy train for Christmas. They have like the best Christmas ever, right? Trees, cakes, candy, turkeys, and dozens of toy trains for these poor kids. Everyone is singing Uncle Scrooge's praises as the noble benefactor of this feast. Donald says, I know. They're asking, where is he? And he says, I know where he is. I'll take him a drumstick. So he brings Uncle Scrooge a drumstick where he's still down in the cave as the train is slowly retrieving his money. And he says he's calculated out he'll be here for 272 years, 11 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days before the train can get all his money out. And that's the end of the story. So, what did you think of this wrap up here?
Just I'm perfect. I've spoken before of how Barks is almost sort of an inspiration with the way that when I think of sort of Chekhov's gun, there's a very sloppy way that it's often done where you give a piece of information that it's sort of like, ding, okay, obviously this is going to be relevant to the conclusion. And you see this oftentimes. And there are two writers I think of as just being excellent at doing this. I mean, in terms of like not novelists, like sort of writers of other mediums. One is Barks and the other is Stephen Moffat in Doctor Who, because he'll often sort of give a piece of information in a joke that then, 20 minutes later, you realize is crucial to the kind of conclusion.
Yeah.
And I think Barks is really good at having someone mention something, or there be, an object or something that's just a sort of organic part of the plot that doesn't have attention called to it, but you notice, right? And very early on, we're told, Scrooge tells us his whole reason for not giving the money, other than the fact that he's greedy, is that he doesn't want to pay for a train. He thinks that this is a totally useless and pointless object.
Right.
And, when I was reading it, I didn't think to myself, oh, okay, so his comeuppance is going to have something to do with this train, or realizing that, play is important or something like this. But we come to the end, and of course, what else is it going to be but a toy train fixing their problems? I just think it's really elegant.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I think this is one of his best. He's good at this, and this is, I think, never better than here. There's a lot of that in this. I was looking like little things like the fact that the rat, Donald's plan backfires on him. He sets Uncle Scrooge up with the rat. Then the rat ends up backfiring on him and eating the dollar. It's a little ironic twist. The dime sinking the money bin, right? That he gets, and then he just takes a joke a little too far, and it ends up like ruining everything. The toy train saving the day. There's just, and even just the subtle foreshadowing of like the whole first half of this story is Uncle Scrooge like stuffing too much money in his money bin, right? Like, so there's all these little setup and payoffs that happen throughout this story. And the toy train is like the best one, that this is the solution. But he's been so, he's scorned the idea of like a toy train. So it's just good storytelling, I think, fundamentally, and it's a real pleasure to read.
Yeah. Um, yeah, this I mean, just kind of concluding thoughts on this. I always love returning to Barks. And it just sort of I don't know, nice in the Christmas season to return to one of his Christmas stories. As you said, he has so many, but this, I think, of those that I've read, it might be my favorite. Because it is so excellently constructed. We haven't talked sort of that much about the art over the course of it, but the art is great. It sort of Barks at his peak. Uh, and it also is sort of touching and has that sort of melancholy that or at least melancholic sort of setup that as we sort of talked about is very common in Christmas media, and just brings it all together. And it's just so satisfying on that last page to see those little kids playing with a whole bunch of toy trains and just surrounded by Christmas trees, having a feast. It's just, yeah, it's just really, I don't know. It's, yeah, yeah. I love it.
Yeah, I've read this one to my kids too, often at Christmas. It's a real gem, from Barks. I highly recommend it. And I will say too, if you have the chance, this can be found. Like I said, it was in a number of different collections, but the actual Christmas for Shacktown from Fantagraphics is just a book worth getting because it has so many other good stories in it. I think it's one that
I think it
collects
has. I think it has golden helmet, or I think or something. Winged helmet. What's it called? Is it golden or?
the Gilded Man. I do believe it has the golden helmet. Yeah,
Yeah, Gilded Man is one of my all-time favorite Bark
yeah,
stories. That yeah,
it's
it's
so good.
yeah,
Another one with a
um,
great ironic twist in it too. But
yeah,
yeah,
sort
Gilded
of
Man is
globetrotting one.
fantastic. Yeah. So in the Big Ben on Killmotor Hill is a lot of fun. The Screaming Cowboy is hilarious. So it's a really good overview of just kind of his range. But they're all really good stories. So if you have a chance to pick this one up, I highly recommend it. But this is kind of I mean, I don't know. There's he did so many good stories. I had to say, this is a place to start, but it's you won't go wrong if you start here and grabbing this one. I highly
And at the risk of being gauche, I want to do engage in a little bit of self promotion. I recently wrote on the Truth Beauty Comics Substack, which we don't plug enough, a sort of guide for particularly parents looking for good comics for kids. And I had sort of a top five, and one of them was Carl Barks. And this was one of the volumes I particularly recommended as a sort of starting place. So
yeah.
should you be interested in that or know anyone who might be, if you just Google Truth Beauty Comics Substack, there's a post right towards the top at the moment. That's a sort of guide of what to get my kid who likes comics. So if you'd find it useful, I hope you'll seek it out, or if you know anyone who would, please share it with anyone.
Yeah, I'd second that. That was a really good article. It kind of I feel like um, you know, I highly recommend that article just because, as a parent, sometimes it's just real. Comics are such a range of just, anything from delightful, like we've been reading, to something that is just like demented and sick. And it's sometimes hard to tell, like, um, it's just sometimes hard to tell what you're getting your kids. So, or even where to look exactly.
Yeah, it is sort of a
So,
wild west in the way that, like,
right.
movies, right? Even though we can criticize in various ways the rating system, we at least have a sense of what it means. We know what's
Hmm.
going to be in a PG-13 movie. We know the kinds of things that are in a G or PG. We know the kinds of things that are in R. Um, and that's just not at all consistent across. Most comics don't have ratings. Those that do are just sort of put on by the publisher, and all the publishers have different systems. So to have a sense of, A, this is something I'm not going to like regret giving my kids, but B, it's like something of quality too, something that has excellent art, has meaningful or at least really funny storytelling. Um, yeah, uh,
Yeah.
and
Good article.
I'm all for getting kids comics for Christmas. So should be
Mm-hmm.
looking for some of those. Go for that. So with that, we conclude our short special Christmas episode. Next year, now not just next episode, but next year, we'll begin a series on classic newspaper comics. Using the Smithsonian collection of newspaper comics, we'll be reading Sunday comics from 1896 to 1916, including early Cats and Jammer Kids, Little Nemo and Slumberland, Mutt and Jeff, and a bunch of others.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Truth Beauty Comics, there are 3 things you can do to support it. The first is to keep listening and tell your friends about the podcast.
The second is to review the podcast, giving it 5 stars wherever you listen to it. The last thing you can do is to consider contributing to our Patreon with a monthly donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can get perks like access to exclusive episodes, voting on upcoming episodes, even an original drawing from Levi. But most of all, you can help make this podcast sustainable.
That's the end of the episode. You can reach us at Truth Beauty Comics or on our social media accounts. Merry Christmas, everyone, and thank you for listening. Remember to take comics seriously and have fun while doing it.